Why should we learn Wohlfahrt's Etude number 38 from book number 2? Well, like with every etude, there's a specific purpose of this etude. Hello to my fellow instrumentalists who have subscribed to the channel already, and hi to the rest of you who haven't yet. I'm Jacques Gadway, and this is Gadway Violin. In today's video, we're taking a look at one of my favorite etudes from Wohlfahrt book number 2, Etude number 38. This is a fast etude, although it's actually marked moderato, but I like to play it fast, and I think that learning it up to a very fast tempo can be very beneficial. When this etude is played at a fast tempo, or better said, a tempo that's challenging for you, it puts your body and your technique to the test. So much of what goes into playing an excerpt like this quickly is developing fast habits. Fast habits don't mean that we're playing fast. They're habits that allow us to play fast. A habit could be, for example, keeping your fingers very close to the string. This habit doesn't actually necessarily speed up the movement of your hand, but decreases the distance that your fingers move from position to position. This decreases, therefore, the length of time that it takes for these fingers to move, and in turn can speed up your playing. That's just one example of one way that you can speed up your playing by developing fast habits. So why do we practice this etude, and what fast habits does it help us create? Well, the number one habit that this helps us build upon is the idea of hand frame and blocking. Hand frame in violin most basically can be defined as the distance or the shape between your first finger and your fourth finger, your index finger and your pinky. However, we can take it a step further and think about blocking. We can think about the shape of all of your fingers in a given time frame. In this etude, for example, we can almost view every single beat as a block. In fact, this bowing from the beginning helps us reinforce this concept. We're really establishing every single beat, and upon every beat, we feel a new block. Each block should have a specific hand shape that allows for the minimal movement of fingers within. This means that within a block, we should be able to move very quickly and easily. The first block that I noticed starts on beat 2. If by the time we reach that D natural at the top, this is beat 2, all of the other fingers are already ready, then it's actually quite easy to play all 4 of them quickly. Same thing is true for the downbeat of the second measure. When we play that A natural, if that second finger is ready to go, close to the string and in a low position, then it can be played very quickly with ease. This doesn't mean that you should start trying to play it very fast, but it means when you play it under tempo, that you should be focusing on this idea. Let's take it from the second beat, for example. We can practice this very slowly, but we can practice it with all of the fingers already down and minimizing the movements of every single finger. If I do this right, from that vantage point, it should be actually quite difficult to see my fingers move at all. We can repeat this process with virtually every single block. So it's pretty clear that the second beat of the first measure and the subsequent 4 beats after that all have very clear blocking. However, what about the first beat of the entire etude? Actually, it does have a block, even though we have a shift within it. If you think about it this way, we're only playing one note in first position, that B flat, before we shift to third position for the D. So why not have that idea of that third position, the blocking of it, in other words, 1, second finger on the E string close to 1, third finger whole step spaced away from there on the A string. This blocking should be thought of and prepared for at the very start. So yes, we're playing that B flat on the A string, but we're already thinking about the blocking of the third position. We're essentially just snagging that B flat in first position before moving on. Even though we're snagging that B flat in first position, we're still already thinking about the blocking of that entire beat. And then by the time we hit that fourth finger, we're re-establishing a new block. And of course, we practice this slowly at first, and perhaps for the majority of the time, but developing these fast habits nonetheless. Another thing you can do to accelerate and gain speed is, of course, as always, you can add rhythms. Let's run through those first 7 measures now, since we have the idea. Here in measure 7 is where we finally have a new idea, which is the next block. Once again, even though we have 4 notes upcoming, we can think of all 4 of those notes as part of a new block. Place that fourth finger, but have all of the fingers essentially ready. The first finger in particular might not exactly be on the B flat, but it's still ready and it knows where it needs to go. If you watched the previous video on Etude number 37, you know that one of the ideas that I like to think about is when I'm thinking about alterations of a finger, or in other words, a movement of a finger from where it previously was to where it needs to be, that alteration or that movement should happen in the background in a rhythmic certainty. So this means during this block, we should have it move either during the E, so right at the beginning, which is a little bit challenging, or potentially on the next strong beat, which would be on the and, this would be on the C. Where exactly you put it is going to be up to your preference, but it should be on one specific note. The rest of that is pretty simple. Now we get into the hard stuff. Starting in this measure, I think it's measure 9, we have these fragmented arpeggios. Every single one of these, once again, could be thought of as a block. All 4 of those notes can be hovering, prepared in advance, thinking of where they need to go. So we practice slowly. And we make sure that as we play this, all of our fingers are getting ready. So we're looking for very little movement in the hand across any block, meaning our hand is essentially preparing all 4 notes of each block every single time. This doesn't mean that deliberately the fingers need to be down, it just means that they need to be as close to their destination as physically possible before they are placed. This reduction of distance equals increased speed over time. All of these are essentially the same idea. We have these blocks. There is one unique difficulty though, which lies in the beginning of this third line. If you're using the fingering that's written here, we have a second finger, which means we're in third position. And then we have a fourth finger on this E flat, which means it needs to be stretched. This means that our fourth finger is going to need to be altered within the block, which means that we're going against what our nature is when we're thinking about blocking, right? The idea of blocking is that we're going to have the next certain amount of notes. In this case, we've basically always been doing 4 notes. In the next 4 notes, every single note is pre-accounted for. It's prepared. How can we prepare a note that needs to be altered? In this case, a fourth finger that needs to be stretched. And the answer is, you can't physically do it, right? You need your fourth finger to be placed in one position and then altered for the next. But you can still mentally prepare for it, and you can get your hand frame to open up in advance. One of the things we can do to further conceptualize blocking in the left hand is to make sure that we have a difference in weight between the fingers. In particular, if we have a block of fingers, whatever our first note is should be the heaviest. Or better said, whatever we want to anchor our block around should be the heaviest. In general, that's going to be the first finger that's going to be played in a specific block. In this case, that's our second finger. So when we play that B flat, we should feel a little bit of extra weight on that second finger and a very light weight on that fourth finger. Like we're stepping down to stretch up. After that, it's pretty smooth sailing for a bit. Until we get to another one of these stretches. This stretch is a little bit easier though because we don't need our fourth finger to be placed previously, which means we can actually physically prepare for the stretch in the block. So when I'm placing that second finger on the C natural, it's at that point where my fourth finger is already beginning to do its stretch. And then when we play our first finger on the B flat, it's going to do its reversal. Continuing on, we have the same ideas over and over again. So even when we have different shapes, so long as it's possible to conceptualize the block, we should be still following that same pattern that we introduced in the beginning. That pattern being thinking of every four notes as its own block and preparing as best we can each of the fingers within them ahead of time. Within that entire blurb that I just played, every single beat can be accounted for the same way we've been doing in the past. Where I ended in that section brings us back to the material from the very beginning, so it should be very much the same. After a couple resting beats, we have a triple stop, and then a quadruple stop, both of which are just in first position and actually, in my opinion, reinforce the main idea of this entire etude. Because of the structure of triple stops and quadruple stops, again we have the same exact idea present itself. The idea of blocking the hand into a specific position that accounts for multiple notes at once. In fact, in some of these fragmented arpeggios that we see earlier in the etude, one way that we could practice them is by placing all of our fingers down in their respective positions at once, not doubling for fingers that are used more than once. Another way you can practice this etude is by changing the bowings. Whenever there aren't slurs already written, one of the things I like to do is add slurs. We're going to slur exactly what our blocks that we've determined already are. So that means we're going to slur every four notes. Very tricky, but it's a great way to, again, emphasize this idea of grouping and blocking the hand. With that, that's the main benefit you can gain from practicing and learning this etude. When you have it, it's really satisfying to play at a very advanced, fast tempo, but you don't need to do that. Remember, practice slowly with fast habits in mind. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, please feel free to leave a comment for any other etude, piece of repertoire, or a violin concept you'd like to see me cover in a future video. And also please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and please like this video so it does somewhat well. With that, I'll leave you. Happy practicing.